Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar Weekly Discussion topic video. This week's video is going to be me discussing who I feel are the best non-bender fighters in the Avatar universe. And I suppose trying roughly to figure out who the best of the best are. I'm not going to say this is like formal rankings, but I'm going to try in the end to come out to somewhat of a top 10 characters or top 5 in the end. We'll see how it goes. But anyway, on screen here, you can see I have a list of, for me, the most notable characters who happen to be non-bender fighters. Straight away, you may notice some absences, why isn't Zahir on here? Why isn't the Blue Spirit Zuko on here? Or anything like that. Zahir's an airbender. We've only ever seen him fight as an airbender. I'm sure he was amazing when he fought before then, but we never saw it, so that's why he doesn't make the list. And it's pretty much the same with a lot of the other characters who maybe don't make the list. If I have honestly left out some really good non-bender fighter that I'm just completely forgetting, let me know in the comments below, and I will give my thoughts on them there and see how that compares to what I say in this video. But in general, I feel like these are the main ones. So as you can see here, it's a long-ish list. Sokka, Suki, Mei, Ty Lee, Jet, June, Hakoda, Piandao, the Lieutenant, Asami, the Yuyan Archers. I'm going to specify out Vashir from the Rough Rhinos as our Yuyan Archer we're talking about here. Utor, Ogode, Kashi, Yalu, Longshot, Smellerbee, Pipsqueak, the Duke, and Sneers. I think immediately we can just get rid of Sneers. We can get rid of the Duke. We can get rid of Pipsqueak. We can get rid of Smellerbee, because I really don't think any of these characters are on the level of anywhere near the top. I think they can fight. They're good in their own way, but they're a little bit overly specialized for me compared to some of the experts that we have on here. Smellerbee, with her kind of knife skills is fine, but to me she seems more of an assassin type character who can kind of poison people from a distance, sneaking up on them. And in this sense, what we're talking about here is really one-on-one fights, and so kind of stealth doesn't really come into play, and I don't think she holds her own all that well up against other people. The Duke, he kind of has to fight with Pipsqueak to be of any use, and then I think just the two of them together don't really stand out all that much. Sneers seems okay as a fighter, but again, nothing special. I think equally with a lot of the Rough Rhinos, just because of their appearances in the Rift and how relatively easy it was for most of our main characters to defeat them, I think they end up coming off the list as well. Characters like Kashi and Ogode especially seem overly specialized, just with having a unique weapon, and that's the only thing going for them. Same with Utor, who was one of our new Rough Rhinos in the comics. Yalu seems interesting in how armored he is, the explosives, but again, he seems to be very easily countered by a lot of characters, so he goes off the list as well for me. Which to me leaves this as our kind of what's left in terms of notable characters. We've got Sokka, Suki, Mei, Ty Lee, Jet, June, Hakoda, Piandao, the Lieutenant, Asami, Vashir, and Longshot. Some of you may be saying, oh, where's Bato on the list? I basically have Hakoda here to represent Bato, because I think Hakoda is better than Bato, and then Bato is basically just a slightly less skilled version of Hakoda. So I'm not going to put both of them on here because they ultimately are quite similar. So, is there anyone else here that we can immediately eliminate? We're immediately going to say with characters, they don't get to ride animals into battle. So Vashir doesn't have a Rough Rhino that he's on as a Yuyan Archer, and June doesn't have Nyla. So I think that eliminates June. And I do want to say here, I don't think June is an awful fighter. I think it's very clear to see that she is strong beyond what she initially comes across as. Able to arm wrestle people into the ground through tables and stuff like that. She's strong. She could probably hold her own up against a decent amount of characters in the show. I just don't really think she stays on this list compared to some of the other characters we have here, and her relative lack of experience in battle that we've seen outside of using Nyla very heavily to get herself an advantage. So June goes off the list. We get that out of the way. Then I think it comes down to the two archers here. I think they're very good support characters for their teams, and if you had to build teams of characters, you'd probably include an archer, and you'd probably include one of Vashir or Longshot here. For me, I probably emphasize Longshot as being the more skilled archer over Vashir, but they're probably both very, very on par. Vashir having like years of serving in the Fire Nation military as one of the most skilled Yuyan archers. Longshot as this kind of prodigal archer who seems to super specialize in his technique and is just amazing. They're both skilled combatants, but I do think in a one-on-one situation, neither of them stand out as like just individually strong fighters where like they'd be able to take a bunch of people out just on their own, unless they had like, as I said with a lot of these characters, a stealthy approach. So that I think limits kind of them, even though they are very skilled. It's just with some of these characters, their specializations in certain weaponry means that they are not suited to be called like the generally best non-bender fighter within the series. So that's why we eliminate Vashir and also Longshot from the list. Which leaves us with Sokka, Suki, Mei, Ty Lee, Jet, Hakoda, Piandao, the Lieutenant, and Asami. I think Mei is the next one we need to focus on the list. I really like Mei as a character, and I'm removing her here from the list, not because I in any way hate her as a character. I just think her fighting skills that we've seen so far are so emphasized on like knives that to me she comes across as like a better version of Smellerbee, where she's very skilled with those throwing knives, with her ability to kind of like secretly take them out of her sleeves and use them extremely effectively to pin people against walls, and she could probably hold her own against a couple of sword fighting people by using knives more standardly. But to me, again, she seems more like an assassin type character who can kind of back you up by sneaking around on the battlefield, as opposed to someone who's going to be a real threat just right there in the middle of a battlefield doing stuff one-on-one. Her skills are very high in terms of knife throwing, and as a ranged fighter, you can definitely put her pretty high on that list. But again, I think it's the lack of her being up against like a lot of really, really powerful people. From what we've seen of her time on like Ozai's Angels with Ty Lee and Azula, she was the one who took the most back seat. She wasn't out there the whole time on the battlefield constantly battling people. She tended to stay back. Anytime things seemed to go wrong, she'd back out, and that's the type of fighter she is. So unfortunately she goes off the list at this point as well. Then to me, of the remaining 8 characters, the Lieutenant and Asami stand out as the two weaker on the list. And I'll tackle them individually now, give them their focus. With the Lieutenant, I feel he is very skilled with those electric Kali sticks, but I think within Korra Book 1 he ended up being the equalist punching bag, the enemy that our heroes could defeat every single time, but he kept coming back for more. It spoke to his like stamina and stuff like that, the fact that it was very difficult to injure him, even though he kept falling off great heights. But that after the first couple of initial episodes, our heroes managed to come up with counters to dealing with those electric Kali sticks, that unless he was fighting a metal bender who completely relied on using the metal whips, which he could electrocute through, he didn't have the most impressive advantage up against benders. He's skilled, for sure, very skilled. I just feel he pretty much drops off the list at this point because he did basically get defeated so many times in the show, and he was only shown to be, I suppose, notably powerful within the first couple of episodes, which was our character's first encounters with the Chi Blockers to more establish them and their skills. So I think he drops off. And then for kind of similar reasons, I also feel that Asami drops off the list at this point as well. To me, she stands out as a character, probably one of the characters who represents this the best, who was very, very protected within her appearances in the show and her fighting ability. I think she is probably the character who on this entire non-bender list, it's the easiest to overrate how skilled Asami is. And I think a lot of that is not because I don't think she's skilled, it's because I actually find it very difficult to judge how skilled she is, because they only very selectively use her in fighting, and it's usually it's like to emphasize once or twice like a really, really cool moment where she comes in, effortlessly takes out like 3 chi blockers at once, or 3 random Kuvira forces guards and stuff like that, Earth Empire guards, and that's really it. She electrocutes the lieutenant by taking him completely by surprise. Other than that, she doesn't really have any notable fights. She ends up fighting in mech suits, and that's a cool skill, that she has the ability to pilot all these kind of machinery type things. But again, as I'm kind of talking about here, it's the person's skill in combat as opposed to like their ability to pilot animals or machinery that I'm talking about here. Again, Asami comes across as a very nice support character to have with her ability to use all this technology. Like, to me, Asami going into a battle would go in with an equal shock glove, maybe 2 for backup or something like that. If she really wanted to go kind of heavy, maybe she'd fight with 2 equal shock gloves if she absolutely needed to. And she's skilled. She's a skilled martial artist. She seems reasonably athletic. I just think she, to me, doesn't stand up against some of the other characters who are left on the list, and I think would kind of fall to some of these other characters if there was a battle that was like that to ever happen. I hope in the comics that we get an exploration of her fighting ability in a little bit more detail. I'd love to be able to say that Asami is higher up on this list. It's just what we know right now. She's a very protected character, and I don't really know what to think of her skills all that much. Because she never really got like a big one-on-one fight. To me, if I went back and was to rewrite something, I'd probably write it more so that the Lieutenant and Asami actually had a proper fight towards the end of book 1, and Asami got the victory. That would be a cool way to establish her as a very powerful non-bender fighter, getting a victory over another notable non-bender who's powerful. So, yep, unfortunately we drop Asami and the Lieutenant off the list, which leaves us with our last 5 characters, who are Sokka, Suki, Ty Lee, Jet, Hakoda, and Piandao. So, where do we go next? I think Hakoda, to me, actually stands out as the weakest of the 6 left on the list. And in part, I do think that's again because we haven't seen this character fight a lot. He has a bit of a legend behind him of the fact that he is the leader of the South, basically. All of the warriors respect him in the South and look up to him. He is treated as a leader by not just the Water Tribe warriors present at the invasion, but basically everyone. He has amazing leadership qualities. But in one-on-one fights, those leadership qualities don't come across amazing. What he does have is experience on the battlefield, skill with a decent variety of weapons, and maybe not the same level as Sokka, but a very kind of unique approach on the battlefield. He can come up with clever tactics and unique ways to do things depending on what's happening. He can do the stuff that's outside of the box, but not to the degree of Sokka. He has notable fights like during the Day of Black Sun, where he's able to take out a bunch of firebenders quite easily using his variety of skills, but it doesn't feel like he had that ultimate power level where he was like almost invincible on the battlefield, that no one could touch him. It doesn't feel like that was the way. He feels kind of more like a kind of brawler character where like he's going to take a few hits, but he's going to take so many people down with him. He leads from the front, he can get hit and keep on going, but he does get hit, and that's the way I'm thinking about him. And maybe it's over-exaggerating the fact that we've seen stuff like his spear got snapped in the Day of Black Sun. He got burned by a firebender during the Day of Black Sun, which took him out as the leader during that battle. But he is still very skilled, as we see again with his fight against Gilak. He's able to very effortlessly and delicately disarm Gilak in their fight, showing how skilled he is. I just feel that he is not quite on the level of some of these other characters, but I do feel I will put an asterisk beside Hakoda on this list and say that he's probably the character that I'm potentially underrating the most, but that is only because we haven't seen him fight as much as some of these other characters. So Hakoda kind of drops off at this point, but he basically becomes, I think, our kind of 6th best non-bender fighter, and that would kind of make Asami our 7th, the Lieutenant our 8th, and I think after that, like, the other characters that we dropped off were just it's basically a top 8 here in terms of really quality fighters. So yeah, we'll get rid of Hakoda and we'll deal with the last 5. So I think just looking at this last 5, Sokka, Suki, Ty Lee, Jet, Piandao, all very powerful characters in their own way. But who comes where, and who do I think is the best? I think immediately what I'm going to do here is pick the number 1. I think Piandao makes the number 1 on this list, and I don't really feel there's a ton to go against that, in the sense of he very clearly is the best swordsman on the list out of the rest of them, in that the only characters you would properly call swordsmen that are left on the list are Jet and Sokka. Suki knows how to use her katana, but you'd never really specify her as being like incredibly amazing with the sword. It just happens to be a weapon she uses from time to time. So he's more technically skilled than Jet and Sokka. He has so much experience being part of the Order of the White Lotus. He is noted as basically being the best swordsman in the entire Avatar universe. And especially his performances in stuff like the final battle, going in with the rest of the Order of the White Lotus and basically taking back Ba Sing Se. He didn't seem like he was trailing from behind with all these really powerful benders around him. It seemed like he was demonstrating the power that non-benders can have if they master their techniques, in that he didn't seem like he was struggling against Sozin's Comet assisted firebenders. He had to get up closer, obviously, because of his reach disadvantage, having to use a sword and not having ranged bending, but his skill, I don't think you can really question. So I think he by default kind of has to be the number 1 on this list, in the sense of we've seen that Sokka's unique tactics aren't enough to give Sokka the victory against Piandao, and I don't think in the comics he's advanced as much in terms of his technical skill to be able to take out Piandao. The only potential weakness of Piandao would be perhaps his age. He is slightly older than kind of past his prime, and that could give other characters a stamina advantage over Piandao. But his skill advantage over everyone else, I think, at the moment, as far as we know what his age is right now, I think makes him number 1. And so it's left, I think, for Sokka, Suki, Ty Lee, and Jet to battle for spots numbers 2 to 4. And so I think let's figure out who is the kind of least effective of those left. For me, I actually think Sokka ends up kind of being a little bit of the weak link of who's left. And the reason I say that is because I actually think by the end of the show, Sokka and Jet, in a way, are quite similar characters, in that they're both skilled swordsmen. They both have a unique approach to fighting, with the way Jet uses his swords, like swinging from the trees and stuff like that, to his advantage. He's quite clever in combat. Sokka's similar in that front. They both are leaders in their own way, even if they maybe don't come across as the absolute greatest leaders, but they are still leaders and can get people behind them. What it really comes down to, I suppose, is if they had a fight, who would actually win that fight? Would Sokka's space sword give him an advantage over Jet's hook sword? Would the fact that Sokka, you would say, I think the main thing here that you would say is Jet is the more skilled swordsman. Sokka has the more powerful sword, and potentially his sword could cut through Jet's swords because Jet's swords are quite thin. But I don't really think that's necessarily what would happen. And then Sokka would actually have the advantage in that I think he is the cleverer character in terms of his abilities in the battlefield. So I think it comes down to, which do you think is a more important factor in that fight? Jet's better skill level or Sokka's better intelligence on the battlefield? And that determines who gets the victory in the fight. And I think this is probably the closest one on this list in terms of like who comes ahead of who. And I've gone back and forth on this constantly since I was thinking about this video. I really don't know which way to put this between these two. In the comments, definitely let me know who you think would win in the fight, Sokka or Jet. I really am not sure. I think Sokka, Jet obviously dies and isn't available anymore to have that fight. The reason I would maybe slightly give Jet the advantage is because of this. Sokka's skill level is good, but Piandao specifically points out that Sokka is not like a technical master. His uniqueness as a swordsman comes from how he uses his intelligence and his surroundings to his advantage. He, in the Lost Adventures comic, Sword Bending, sparred multiple times with Zuko while they were together just prior to the finale. Zuko won every single one of their sword sparring sessions where he didn't use bending. So Zuko didn't use bending at all, and he still beat Sokka just based on his sword skills. Jet was able to fight evenly with Zuko when they did fight. Now, was that Zuko potentially holding back because he was only defending and he kind of knew he had the advantage because everyone thought Jet was crazy? I'm not fully sure, but either way, Jet was able to hold off Zuko. Sokka isn't able to hold off Zuko. And I think that's quite notable. And I think that skill level for Jet gives him an advantage over Sokka. Sokka maybe is slightly closer than you expect than maybe other people would, but I'm actually going to give this to Jet. So I think Sokka comes 5th on the list. I think Jet comes 4th. And so what we're left with is to decide the 2nd and 3rd place spot between Suki and Ty Lee. Now, you may be asking, why do I rate Suki and Ty Lee above both Sokka and Jet? And it's because of this. I think prior to what the reveals in the comics, I maybe wouldn't have made this decision, but because Suki and Ty Lee are both now on the Kyoshi Warriors together, and because they have both shared their kind of skill sets with each other, I think both of them have become much better fighters and have more variety to them than Sokka and Jet, and so that's why I rate them above Sokka and Jet. And specifically what I mean by that is that Suki is a Kyoshi warrior, has the skills of a warrior, is amazing, is skilled with a variety of different weapons. She wears her kind of Kyoshi warrior armor. It is armor, so that gives her kind of defensive abilities. She has her fan as a weapon. She can also use that fan as a shield. She has her katana and other stuff as well. But Ty Lee has also shown that she has helped the Kyoshi warriors to learn chi blocking. So, as far as we're aware, Suki actually has some minor skill with chi blocking that she can use in battle, and I think that gives her an extra little advantage that kind of smooths out some of the gaps in her kind of arsenal. That I think she can now handle benders a little bit better, because she can defend against them and get up close by blocking their attacks with her shield, but now she can actually kind of turn off their bending if she gets up close enough. She's not super skilled with chi blocking, so it wouldn't be as amazing as Ty Lee's chi blocking is, but it still is another weapon in her arsenal to go up against benders. So I think that gives her a huge advantage. And then equally with Ty Lee becomes a Kyoshi warrior. So she goes from kind of being the best chi blocker in the Avatar universe, amazing acrobat, probably the best kind of acrobat in the show, one of the hardest characters to probably hit in a battle with. But if you do hit her, she doesn't really wear any armor or anything like that. She's pretty much kind of like a glass cannon type character. You pretty much hit her and she's kind of out of the fight. But she now wears Kyoshi warrior armor as well, so she's kind of made up. She has a little bit of defense. As far as we're aware, Ty Lee is shown to, at the very least, carry the Kyoshi warrior fan around with her, but perhaps not the sword. So that makes sense for her character. She brings the defensive weapon with her, but doesn't use a sword, obviously. She, in combat, uses her chi blocking to take her opponents out that way, make their limbs useless, and give her an advantage in terms of movement ability and stuff like that. So, they're kind of, in a way, kind of similar characters in that they have roughly the same skill sets, in that Suki is also a good gymnast, but she's not as good as Ty Lee. Suki's a better warrior in terms of combat experience than Ty Lee, but Ty Lee has learned that from being part of the Kyoshi Warriors, and it's just like, which do you rate as slightly higher than the other, even though they both have very similar techniques. Ty Lee's chi blocking has been shown to be incredibly effective, even up against a large amount of other benders. She's been shown to be able to take out lots of earth benders, do well against even like Katara and so on. And I think that demonstrates just how skilled she is and how quick and agile she is, and that gives her a huge advantage in battle as well. So I think her Kyoshi Warrior training makes her right up there with the best of the non-bender warriors as well. In terms of a final say on this, I would give the slight advantage to Suki because I think her warrior skills are slightly more useful in a one-on-one scenario than Ty Lee's kind of expert mastery of chi blocking. Now, some may disagree with me on that, but I think ultimately the fact that Suki kind of has more skill in terms of just direct combat, in terms of like kicking, punching, and actually doing damage, as well as being able to use like a sword and use her kind of warrior weapons more effectively, I think that would give her the advantage over Ty Lee, who maybe specializes a little bit too much in chi blocking, and the idea that like if she's going up against them as a non-bender, yes, she can sort of shut down their limbs to a degree like she did with Sokka, but that's not gonna like have the biggest impact on absolutely everyone. Like when you do that to a bender, you do really impact their ability to fight. But with Suki, she can use her katana with one hand, she can do stuff, she can kick, she has gymnastics as well, and it doesn't completely take Suki out of the fight. So that's my order here. So the top 5 is number 1 Piandao, number 2 Suki, number 3 Ty Lee, number 4 Jet, I believe I chose, and then number 5 Sokka. So let me know in the comments, as I said, if there's any characters I missed. Are there any characters from earlier on in the video you think I dismissed too soon from the discussion for higher up on the list? And are there any kind of selections, orders that on the list that you really, really didn't agree with? So let me know all that in the comment section below. But for now, that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.